Hello everybody, it's Foxy speaking, and welcome to another episode of Foxy's Fun Inspirational Chats. And today I will be your host. And in this episode, this one is about learning the international steam railways with Foxy. Well, international steam engines, the learning international steam engines continuation. Part 2 we're on now, and let's dive in. Now we're on to the next part. Oh goodness, now I'm beginning. How to let it out? Get the yawn off of my chest. Okay. Motive power depots, or engine sheds in common parlance, were the powerhouses of Britain's Industrial Revolution. They were strategically located at important junctions in large towns and throughout the industrial belts. Here, within a space of a little more than a few acres, would be concentrated the power for the region's prime transport needs. Motive power depots fulfilled two principal functions. Firstly, they were responsible for rostering out locomotives for all the workings within their area, and secondly, they provided routine daily maintenance for the locomotives as well as periodic servicing and basic repairs. Each depot had its own allocation of locomotives, and these could range from several hundred at the larger sheds to less than a dozen at the smaller ones. Many large towns and important junctions had separate depots for passenger and freight operations. Others in less important areas provided locomotives for a whole range of services. A fine example of motive power zoning was at Crewe, where the North Shed handled the top link passenger power for the many routes radiating from that junction, whilst Crewe South Depot handled the multiplicity at freight and shunting diagrams always associated with any important junction and marshalling yard. In the later years of steam, the tall, mechanical coaling plants were familiar landmarks and ready pointers to the whereabouts of these enchanting places. Rostering was extremely complex, and many locomotives would run for periods of several days, depots on the ongoing section of the various diagrams being responsible for fueling and routing services as necessary. Few people could fail to be thrilled by the atmosphere and intrigue of the engine sheds. The massive concentration of locomotives in close proximity that was positively awe-inspiring, and the omnipresent tension of these gurgling giants unforgettable. These were places of intense and fervent activity, where locomotives coming in for coaling, watering, fire raking, oiling, sanding, and turning contrasted with the steady steam of prepared steam locomotives going out to work. All of this happened alongside massive backup facilities that enabled others to receive boiler washouts and more extensive routine maintenance in the sick bay, as the repair area of the depot was known. At the height of the steam age, the railway was the lifeblood of the economy, and motive power depots were operative in varying degrees of intensity every day and night of the year. An average depot with an allocation of 80 locomotives would employ hundreds of men on a 3-shift system around the clock, ranging from drivers and firemen to fitting staff, shed labourers, and many grades, down to the junior cleaners who traditionally were beginning their long apprenticeship to becoming drivers. On the administrative side were the shed foremen and the many grades of charge hands, along with the clerical staff who handled everything from locomotive mileages to drivers' time cards. The whole operation would be under a shedmaster who was answerable in turn to the divisional superintendents. The depots themselves took many fascinating forms. Some were roundhouses with the roofs radiating from a common turntable in the centre. Others were longhouses in which the engines were placed one behind another on any number of tracks, whilst others were half-round houses, again with the roots radiating from a common turntable. Whatever the form of depot, a section was always reserved for repairs and maintenance, with most of the really intense activity occurring in the shed yard. The motive power depot was a creation of the steam age, required partly because of the magnitude of railway operations at the time, but also because of the labour intensiveness of the steam locomotive itself. A considerable number of depots were needed. As recently as 1950, there were over 350 in Britain alone. Today, the prime objective is to have the minimum number of depots, with locomotives constantly out on line, moving from stabling points and only visiting their home depot at infrequent intervals when periodic maintenance has to be carried out. Indeed, the whole emphasis of locomotive design now is to reduce such maintenance by modular construction of parts, the ultimate idea being to keep locomotives permanently online for the vast majority of their working lives. Efficient though this may be, it has deprived the railway of one of its most fascinating aspects, for a concentration of many locomotives on shed comprised of both home engines and visitors, with their toxic, exotic aura of faraway places, has always been a source of joy and fascination for young and old alike. Above, 2 British thoroughbreds on shed at Oliveria on a former Buenos Aires and Great Southern Railway network in Argentina. The one on the left is a IIA Class 280 alongside one of the splendid 15B Class 480s. The tragic decline of this once magnificent railway is clearly in evidence, for the pride of the BAGS has been decimated by the petty profiteering of road hauliers with vested interests and by fifth column practices. The Scottish ancestry of this IIB Class 280 right is in full evidence, albeit that this example was one of the last batch delivered and came from the Vulcan foundry at Newton-le-Willows, Lancashire in 1931. It was just reading in a picture which I can showcase here, and it had a little bit of information to have been seen. Can you see? Okay, no, it wasn't funny what happened, but I was just laughing to see if you'd seen it. That's what I only meant to laugh, at something being decimated. That'd be awful. A lively scene at the Sabero Colliery in northern Spain, depicting a vintage Sharp Stewart 060 El Izia of 1878, on the left standing alongside an 060 built by Coilet of Belgium. This meter gauge system is one of steam's last strongholds in Spain, although steam building finished in India in 1972. Major overhauls continue to this day. One of the principal works is in Jamalpur, where bottom left an HGS Class 280 descended from the Biza period is seen alongside a WP Classic Pacific. The two engines are preparing for running trials from Jamalpur shed, having received major overhauls. Two Biza-styled classics below at Lucknow received the detailed embellishments so characteristic of Indian locomotives. The inside cylinder 060 on the left was built by Armstrong Whitworth of Newcastle upon Tyne in 1923, whilst the HPS Class 460 on the right came from the Vulcan Foundry in 1950. The once vast Howrah steam sheds in Calcutta had, until the late 70s, classic British designs from the Biza and X series. Overleaf and inside cylinder 060 made of all work reposes alongside one of the magnificent XC Class Pacifics introduced in 1928. Here's a picture referencing it all, if one may so say. That's it. That's the one. If one could find it. The Japanese sent many of their superbly styled designs to Taiwan when the island was under their occupation and known as Formosa. Perhaps the most interesting were these Japanese National Railway C-57 Class Pacifics, and this one below is depicted near the end of its working life at the Chia Yi Depot on the west coast main line of the Taiwan Government Railway. Right, one of the Austrian State Railway 77 Class 462s protrudes from the semi-round house at Linz. The unusual chimney indicates that she is fitted with a diesel ejector, an Austrian innovation designed to improve draughting and reduce coal consumptions. Overleaf more Japanese standard designs on the Taiwan Government Railways 3-foot-6 gauge main lines featuring from left to right a 960-280, a 8620 Class 260 Mogul, and a latter-day D50 Class 282 Mikado. The trio is seen boiling up for action at Hisinchu motive-powered depot on Taiwan's west coast main line. I showed a picture referencing what I was reading. Here they are, but some of you may not see properly, and my most profound apologies for any inconveniences caused. One of China's finest steam centres in Harbin above in the northeast of the century, until the recent infiltration of diesels, the depot had an allocation of 100 steam locomotives, of which most were QJs for working long-distance freight trains, particularly to the south along the main line through Manchuria. Top right, locomotive utilization is highly impressive. Servicing activities are carried out with great rapidity, and the engines return to the main line with minimum delay. Right, the JS class Mikado 282, one of the QJ's smaller sisters, reposes alongside an even smaller SY class industrial Ricardo. China's most modern Pacifics are the RM class, introduced in 1957, and no 1228 overleaf is shown resting outside the half-round house at Changchun prior to working a semi-fast to Jilin. One of Britain's last great industrial systems was based around Dalwellington in Ayrshire, where a stud of Andrew Barclay saddle tanks survived on various duties until the mid-70s. As ironworks was built in Dalwellington in 1845 and was served by collieries in the immediate area, which survived long after the foundries were closed down. The system connected with British Railways at Waterside, the site of the former ironworks, the most outlying colliery being at Pennyveely, where West area number 21 above a standard 16-inch Andrew Barclay 040 can be seen sedately drawing a rake of freshly filled coals. Notice that the first wagon is non-standard and is serving as an improved tender for additional fuel capacity. The industrial locomotive is quite distinct from its mainline counterpart and saw use in such places as collieries, quarries, foundries, docks, coking plants, power stations and large factories. These engines were seldom seen by the public at large, often being confined to industrial establishments of the beaten track or else lost within the maze of foundries and factories that were the central features of the major manufacturing belts of Britain. The world's first steam railway was an industrial built at an ironworks in South Wales in 1804. It was designed to convey iron to a canal basin for shipment by barge to the docks. A few years later, industrial engines began to appear on the coal fields of Yorkshire and Northumberland. The origin of the industrial locomotive lay in the small engines built for the contractors who undertook the massive program of construction throughout the railway mania of the 1840s. These engines were needed to supplement the muscle power of the navies and horses when building cuttings. Embankments, tunnels, viaducts and stations. They had to be compact and economical, able to work over temporary track, negotiate tight curves, and yet have sufficient adhesion to draw heavy train loads of earth and materials. Additionally, the engines had to be easy to transport from one site to another. Small tank engines met all these requirements. Once the main lines were laid, the Industrial Revolution progressed with increased velocity. Enormous quantities of iron and coal were required, and these very industries needed the same type of locomotives as the contractors did. Thus, by 1850, the industrial steam locomotive, as it appears in these pages, had evolved. The basic form was a side or a saddle tank, which had either 4 or 6 coupled wheels 040 and 060 with 2 cylinders usually placed inside the frame. Outside cylinder versions did occur, particularly on the 4-wheelers, where the short boiler provided insufficient room for a crank axle. These engines changed little throughout their evolution, growing within moderate limits both in terms of power output and size, and seldom exceeding 50 tons in weight. Industrial engines are associated with the towns in which their builders were located. In Scotland, the coal and ironstone reserves of Ayrshire gave work to builders in Kilmarnock, preeminent amongst whom was Andrew Barclay, who produced highly distinctive locomotives for almost a century. In Newcastle upon Tyne, Robert Stevenson and Hawthorne Leslie both produced highly distinctive designs. But the true home of the industrial locomotive was Leeds, where in the tiny parish of Hunslet there were 4 celebrated builders: Manning Wardle, Hudswell Clark, Kitsons and Hunslet. Further south, in Stratford, William Bagnall readily tailored his designs to customer requirements, and as a result, this company's list contains some of the most delightful variations ever played on the conventional theme. Meanwhile, in the Deep South, a distinctive family of engines arose from the designs of Pickett and Avonside in Bristol. Sadly, the combination of closures, rationalizations in plant layout, and the increasing use of trucks and overhead cranes within all aspects of heavy industry has led to a drastic decline in the number of locations using industries, as has the mainline railway's use of merry-go-round trains to service industries such as power stations and collieries direct. So although steam survived in industry for some years after it had disappeared from mainline services, diesels rapidly encroached on the surviving locations, and today, after almost 2 centuries of operation, the industrial locomotive is extinct in Britain. These engines preceded their mainline counterparts by some 20 years and survived them by approximately the same time span. Well, I shall leave it at this for now. Ouch. It was not wax, it was just something was a little itchy in my left ear, but my hearing, rest assured, is okay. Do be assured on that. But putting that irrelevant thing to one side, I do thanks everybody all indeed for watching, and there will certainly be more parts, showcasing me reading more of this book. There are loads and loads and loads of pages, so I will read more pages over time when more parts come out of this. And once that's done, there will be other episodes in between, not just referencing this, but other things too. do be assured, and certainly some more Robert the Cat episodes in the middle alongside more of these showcasing and referencing this. Just to tell you all, thanks all everybody indeed for watching, and I do hope you enjoyed it, and may your good wishes bring you great expectations of happiness.